You telling me that if the right person stood up and called for us to sacrifice PPE for our nurses and our MDs who are on the front lines, that like people wouldn't reach down deep in their own supply that they've been like stocking and carefully storing there, and just say, here, take it. Like right now, an actual leader would use this time to bring out the heroic character. And I'm going to just go wildly patriotic because I freaking love this country. We've got this dormant population in the US that loves leadership and country and pride in our freedom and not being told what to do. And we still have this thing that binds us together, and all of the merchants of division just be gone.
I totally agree with you. I think there is a deep hunger for that leadership. Why hasn't one arisen?
Because we don't have the right Surgeon General. We have a guy saying, come on, guys, don't buy masks. They don't really work for you. Save them for our healthcare professionals. No, you can't do that. You have to say, you know what? These masks actually do work, and they more work to protect other people from you, but they would work for you. They'll keep you somewhat safer if you wear them. Here's the deal. You've got somebody who's taking huge amounts of viral load all the time because the patients are shedding. Do you want to protect that person who's volunteered to be on the front line, who's up sleepless nights? You just change the message. You stop lying to people. You level with them. It's like, it's bad.
Absolutely. But that's a little bit specific. So you have to be just honest about the facts of the situation. Yes. But I think you were referring to something bigger than just that.
Yeah.
It's inspiring, rewriting the Constitution, sort of rethinking how we work as a nation.
Yeah, I think you should probably, amend the Constitution once or twice in a lifetime so that you don't get this distance from the foundational documents. And, part of the problem is that we've got two generations on top that feel very connected to the U.S. They feel bought in. And we've got three generations below. It's a little bit like watching your parents riding the tricycle that they were supposed to pass on to you. And it's like, you're now too old to ride a tricycle, and they're still whooping it up, ringing the bell with the streamers coming off the handlebars. And you're just thinking, do you guys never get bored? Do you never pass a torch? Do you really want it? We had 5 septuagenarians, all born in the 40s, running for president of the United States when Klobuchar dropped out. The youngest was Warren. We had Warren, Biden, Sanders, Bloomberg, and Trump from like 1949 to 1941, all who had been the oldest president at inauguration. And nobody says, Grandma and Grandpa, you're embarrassing us.
Except Joe Rogan. Let me put it on you. You have a big platform. You're somewhat of an intelligent, eloquent guy. What role do you play? Why aren't you that leader? Well, I would argue that you're in ways becoming that leader.
So I haven't taken enough risk. Is that your idea? What should I do or say at the moment?
No, you have taken quite a big risks, and we'll talk about it.
All right.
But you're also on the outside shooting in, meaning you're dismantling the institution from the outside as opposed to becoming the institution.
Do you remember that thing you brought up when you were on The View?
The View?
I'm sorry, when you were on Oprah?
I didn't get the invite.
I'm sorry. When you were on Bill Maher's program, what was that thing you were saying? They don't know we're here. They may watch us.
Yeah.
They may quietly slip us a direct message, but they pretend that this internet thing is some dangerous place where only lunatics play.
Well, who has the bigger platform, The Portal or Bill Maher's program or The View?
Bill Maher and The View.
In terms of viewership or in terms of what's the metric of size?
Well, first of all, the key thing is take a newspaper and even imagine that it's completely fake, okay? And that it has very little in the way of circulation. Yet imagine that it's a 100-year-old paper and that it's still part of this game, this internal game of media. The key point is that those sources that have that kind of mark of respectability to the institutional structures matter in a way that even if I say something on a very large platform that makes a lot of sense, if it's outside of what I've called the gated institutional narrative, or GIN, it sort of doesn't matter to the institutions. So the game is, if it happens outside of the club, we can pretend that it never happened.
How can you get the credibility and the authority from outside the gated institutional narrative?
Well, first of all, you and I both share institutional credibility coming from our associations. So we were both at MIT.
Yes.
Were you at Harvard at any point?
Nope.
Okay. Well,
I lived in Harvard Square.
so did I. But, at some level, the issue isn't whether you have credentials in that sense. The key question is, can you be trusted to file a flight plan and not deviate from that flight plan when you are in an interview situation? Will you stick to the talking points? I will not.
Yeah.
And that's why you're not going to be allowed in the general conversation, which amplifies these sentiments.
But I'm still trying to.
So your point would be is that let's say both. So you've done how many Joe Rogan?
4.
I've done 4 too, right? So both of us are somewhat frequent guests. The show is huge. You know the power as well as I do. And people are going to watch this conversation. Huge number watched our last one. By the way, I want to thank you for that one. That was a terrific, terrific conversation. Really did change my life. Lex, you're a brilliant interviewer. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. You changed my life too, that you gave me a chance. So that was...
No. I'm so glad I did that one. What I would say is that we keep mistaking how big the audience is for whether or not you have the KISS. And the KISS is a different thing.
KISS? What does that stand for?
Well, it's not an acronym yet.
Okay.
Thank you for asking. It's a question of, are you part of the interoperable, institution-friendly discussion? And that's the discussion which we ultimately have to break into.
But that's what I'm trying to get at is how does Eric Weinstein become the president of the United States?
I shouldn't become the president of the United States. Not interested. Thank you very much for asking.
Okay. Get into a leadership position where, I guess I don't know what that means, but where you can inspire millions of people to inspire the sense of community, inspire the kind of actions required to overcome hardship, the kind of hardship that we may be experiencing, to inspire people to work hard and face the difficult, hard facts of the realities we're living through, all those kinds of things that you're talking about. That leader, can that leader emerge from the current institutions? Or alternatively, can it also emerge from the outside? I guess that's what I was asking.
So my belief is that this is the last hurrah for the elderly centrist kleptocrats.
Can you define each of those terms?
Okay. Elderly, I mean people who were born at least a year before I was. That's a joke. You can laugh. No, because I'm born on the cusp of the Gen X boomer divide. So, yeah. Centrist, they're pretending, there are 2 parties, Democrat and Republican Party in the United States. I think it's easier to think of the mainstream of both of them as part of an aggregate party that I sometimes call the looting party, which gets us to kleptocracy, which is ruled by thieves. And the great temptation has been to treat the U.S. like a trough, and you just have to get yours because it's not like we're doing anything productive. So everybody's sort of looting the family mansion, and somebody stole the silver, and somebody's cutting the pictures out of the frames. And, roughly speaking, we're watching our elders live it up in a way that doesn't make sense to the rest of us.
Okay, so if it's the last hurrah, this is the time for leaders to step up.
No, we're not ready yet. We're not ready.
I just disagree with that.
I call out, the head of the CDC should resign. The Surgeon General should resign. Trump should resign. Pelosi should resign. De Blasio should resign.
But they're not going to resign.
I understand that. So that's why. So we'll wait.
No, but that's not how revolutions work. You don't wait for people to resign. You step up and inspire the alternative.
Do you remember the Russian Revolution of 1907?
It's before my time.
But there wasn't a Russian Revolution of 1907.
So you're thinking we're in 1907, not
I'm saying
1917.
you're too early.
But we got this, Spanish flu came in 1718. So I would argue that there's a lot of parallels there. World War One.
I think it's not time yet. Like John Prine, the songwriter, just died of COVID. That was a pretty big.
Really?
Yeah.
By the way, yes, of course. I every time we do this, we discover our mutual appreciation of obscure, brilliant, witty songwriters.
Well, he's really quite good, right?
He's really good. Yeah, he died.
My understanding is that he passed recently due to complications of corona. So we haven't had large enough shocking deaths yet. Picturesque deaths of a family that couldn't get treatment. There are stories that will come and break our hearts. And we have not had enough of those. The visuals haven't come in.
But I think they're coming.
Well, we'll find out.
But that you have to be there. You have to be there when they come. I mean,
but we didn't get the visual, for example, of falling man from 9/11.
Right.
So the outside world did, but Americans were not. It was thought that we would be too delicate. So just the way you remember Pulitzer Prize winning photographs from the Vietnam era, you don't easily remember the photographs from all sorts of things that have happened since, because something changed in our media. We are insensate. We cannot feel or experience our own lives and the tragedy that would animate us to action.
Yeah, but I think I think there's going to be that suffering that's going to build and build and build in terms of businesses, mom and pop shops that close. And I think for myself, I think often that I'm being weak and I feel like I should be doing something. I should be becoming a leader on a small scale.
You can't. This is not World War II, and this is not Soviet Russia.
Why not? Why not?
Because our internal programming, the malware that sits between our ears, is much different than the propagandized malware of the Soviet era. I mean, people were both very indoctrinated and also knew that at some level it was BS. They had a double mind. I don't know. I mean, there must be a great word in Russian for being able to think both of those things simultaneously.
You don't think people are actually sick of the partisanship, sick of incompetence?
Yeah, but I called for revolt the other day on Joe Rogan, and people found it quixotic.
Well, because I think you're not. I think revolt is different. I think
okay, I'm really angry.
Yes,
I'm furious. I cannot stand that this is my country at the moment. I'm embarrassed.
So let's build a better one.
Yeah,
right. I'm
in.
Okay, so
okay, but
that's something.
So let's take over a few universities. Let's start running a different experiment at some of our better universities. Like when I did this experiment, I said, if this were 40 years ago, the median age, I believe, of a university president was 51. That would have the person in Gen X, and we'd have a bunch of millennial presidents, a bunch of, more than half Gen X. It's almost 100% baby boom at this moment. And how did that happen? We can get into how they changed retirement, but this generation above us does not feel, or even the older generation, silent generation. I had Roger Penrose on my program.
Excellent conversation.
And thank you, really appreciate that. And I asked him a question that was very important to me. I said, look, you're in your late 80s. Is there anyone you could point to as a successor that we should be watching? We can get excited. I said, here's an opportunity to pass the baton. And he said, well, let me hold off on that. I was like, oh, is it ever the right moment to point to somebody younger than you to keep your flame alive after you're gone? And also, I don't know whether, I'm just going to admit to this. People treat me like I'm crazy for caring about the world after I'm dead. Or wanting to be remembered after you're gone. Like, well, what does it matter to you? You're gone. It's this deeply sort of secular somatic perspective on everything, where we don't You know that phrase in As Time Goes By? He says, "It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die." I don't think people imagined then that there wouldn't be a story about fighting for love and glory. And like, we are so out of practice about fighting, rivals for love and fighting for glory in something bigger than yourself.
But the hunger is there.
Well, that was the point then, right? The whole idea is that Rick was, he was like Han Solo of his time. He's just like, I stick my neck out for nobody. It's like, oh, come on, Rick. You're just pretending. You actually have a big soul, right? And so at some level, that's the question. Do we have a big soul, or is it just all bullshit?
See, I think there's huge Manhattan Project style projects, whether you talk about physical infrastructure or going to Mars, the SpaceX, NASA efforts, or huge scientific efforts.
Well, we need to get back into the institutions, and we need to remove the weak leadership. That we have weak leaders, and the weak leaders need to be removed, and they need to seat people more dangerous than the people who are currently sitting in a lot of those chairs.
Or build new institutions.
Good luck.
Well, so one of the nice things of from the internet is, for example, somebody like you can have a bigger voice than almost anybody at the particular institutions we're talking about.
That's true. But the thing is, I might say something. You can count on the fact that the, provost at Princeton isn't going to say anything.
What do you mean? Too afraid?
Well, if that person were to give an interview, how are things going in research at Princeton? Well, I'm hesitant to say it, but they're perhaps as good as they've ever been, and I think they're going to get better. Oh, is that right? All fields? Yep. I don't see a weak one. It's just like, okay, great. Who are you, and what are you even saying? We're just used to total nonsense 24/7.
Yeah. What do you think might be a beautiful thing that comes out of this? Like, what is there a hope that, like, a little inkling, a little fire of hope you have about our time right now?
Yeah, I think one thing is coming to understand that the freaks, weirdos, mutants, and other ne'er-do-wells, sometimes referred to as grifters. I like that one. Grifters and gadflies were very often the earliest people on the coronavirus. That's a really interesting question. Why was that? And it seems to be that they had already paid such a social price that they weren't going to be beaten up by being told that, oh my God, you're xenophobic. You just hate China, or wow, you sound like a conspiracy theorist. So if you'd already paid those prices, you were free to think about this. And everyone in an institutional framework was terrified that they didn't want to be seen as the alarmist, the Chicken Little. And so that's why you have this confidence where, de Blasio says, get on with your lives, get back in there and celebrate Chinese New Year in Chinatown, despite coronavirus. It's like, okay, really? So you just always thought everything would automatically be okay if you adopted that posture.
So you think this time reveals the weakness of our institutions and reveals the strength of our gadflies and the weirdos and the...
No, not necessarily the strength, but the value of freedom. Like, a different way of saying it would be, wow, even your gadflies and your grifters were able to beat your institutional folks because your institutional folks were playing with a giant mental handicap. So just imagine, like, we were in the story of Harrison Bergeron by Vonnegut, and our smartest people were all subjected to distracting noises every 7 seconds. Well, they would be functionally much dumber because they couldn't continue a thought through all the disturbance. So in some sense, that's a little bit like what belonging to an institution is that if you have to make a public statement, of course the Surgeon General is going to be the worst. Because they're just playing with too much of a handicap. There are too many institutional players who are like, don't screw us up. And so the person has to say something wrong. We're going to back propagate a falsehood. And this is very interesting. Some of my socially oriented friends say, Eric, I don't understand what you're on about. Of course masks work, but you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to get us not to buy up the masks for the doctors. And I think, okay, so you imagine that we can just create scientific fiction at will so that you can run whatever social program you want. This is what my point is, get out of my lab. Get out of the lab. You don't belong in the lab. You're not meant for the lab. You're constitutionally incapable of being around a lab. You need to leave the lab.